do have that warning in force. That rain band sweeps southward through the day, so the skies will become clearer. There will be some sunny spells by the afternoon, but as I said, it is going to be a very blustery afternoon, and there will be some quite intense showers moving in from the north and west. The southwest will hold on to the slightly milder air, but a lot more of that cloud and rain through much of the day, and we're likely to see some travel delays due to that wind warning as well. Friday will likely be a calmer but still quite a windy day, and we'll see a stream of showers still moving in from the north and west. In the southwest, though, a drier and brighter day. However, in the far north, with the strong winds and a risk of snow showers, there is a risk of blizzards. Into the weekend, though, it does stay mild and windy in the run-up to Christmas. That's all for now. See you later.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Put in your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, you're with GB News, and our top story tonight. The mother of the murdered teenager Brianna Jai says her daughter's two killers haven't shown an ounce of remorse after being found guilty of her daughter's murder. In February, Brianna was found with fatal stab wounds in a park in Cheshire. The pair, identified only as girl X and boy Y, both now aged 16 but 15 at the time, had denied the murder and blamed each other for the killing. Baroness Michelle Mone says she has an audio recording of a senior civil servant offering to make a National Crime Agency investigation go away if she paid money to the government. It comes after she admitted she's set to benefit from a contract with PPE firm MedPro, which earned a £60 million profit supplying protective equipment to the NHS during the coronavirus pandemic. Earlier, the Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove said he hoped a criminal case would be brought against her. The Chancellor is set to strike a deal with Switzerland aimed at easing UK firms' access to the Swiss market and vice versa. Jeremy Hunt is going to be travelling to Bern tomorrow to sign the agreement, which will mutually recognise one another's market laws and regulations. It's going to create a framework to facilitate cross-border trade in wholesale financial services, with the Treasury hoping this will boost markets in the City of London. Patients have been warned there'll be significant disruption to NHS services as junior doctors begin their 3-day walkout less than a week before Christmas. This strike will last until December the 23rd as part of a major escalation in their dispute over pay. Hospital leaders have described the walkouts as their worst fears realised as the number of people needing help with winter viruses rises. The action will be followed by a 6-day strike at the start of January as well. That'll be the longest in NHS history. Meanwhile, Labour has pledged to cut cancer waiting times and get cancer patient diagnoses earlier. The party's promised to deliver an extra 2 million appointments during evenings and at the weekend to tackle the NHS's backlog. Labour says it's going to be funded by abolishing the non-dom tax status. The catch-up on cancer plan announced by Labour will also double the number of MRI and CT scans in operation. Now, experts are warning of potential eye injuries when it comes to opening bottles of fizz, Prosecco, champagne and the like this Christmas. The University of Cambridge says corks can launch themselves across the room 13 metres and at speeds of up to 50 miles an hour, potentially causing permanent eye damage. They say the pressure in a 750 millilitre bottle of champagne or sparkling wine is about 3 times that of a standard car tyre. Experts are suggesting chilling the bottle before opening it to reduce the pressure and, of course, pointing it at a 45-degree angle away from yourself and others. You have been told. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. Tonight I'm joined by Josh Howie and Paul Cox, looking very much like the firm of Cox and Howie.
Yes, we are, aren't we?
Are you hiring at the moment?
We haven't got any work, so we can't hire anybody.
You also look like as if you might have just invented an early form of flying machine as well. I don't know, is it the glasses?
We're looking pretty clever.
You are.
Wait till we open our mouths.
Anything too much past you. Anyway, let's have a look at the front pages. Daily Mail kick us off. What they did to our beautiful Brianna will haunt us forever. We'll be taking a look at that. The Guardian, outrage over police access to 50 million driving licences, or possibly 50-metre driving licences, to run face checks. The tax cuts in 2024 after surprise fall in inflation. I'm not surprised. Times, cheaper mortgages set to ease living costs. Told you so. Financial Times, Modi ready to look into any evidence of assassination plot on American soil. That story still underestimated. And the Daily Star throwing us their usual curveball. Apocalypse soon. Those were your front pages. So the first of those stories, the Daily Mail, Josh, very sad business.
Yes, what they did to our beautiful Brianna will haunt us forever. This is, of course, the terrible murder of Brianna Gay, and she was 16. two 15-year-olds, a boy and a girl. It seems like they were obsessed with serial killers and whatnot.
Torture and so on, yeah.
Torture and all this, and they blamed each other, but they've both been found guilty.
And they're at a tricky age, I would say, aren't they, legally speaking? I mean, I remember, for instance, the Bulger killings. Everyone understood that although they were absolutely horrific killings, there was a limit to how much you could...
Yeah. But 15-year-olds, yeah, absolutely, very much on the what level of accountability or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
It's terrible. I'm going to say something that might not be... But what's not mentioned here on the front page, what's not mentioned in The Guardian, we're going to look at in a second, it's not mentioned that she was trans.
Yeah.
They certainly did mention that a lot on the initial reporting of this case. It was found out during the case that actually her being trans had nothing to do with the murder. If anything, well, secondary or whatever. They were three other guys they were looking to murder.
None of whom were trans.
None of whom were trans. No. But the point is that there was a lot of speculation when this all happened, and there were two other teenage murders that week as well.
Yeah. So what the speculation was that
this was transphobia. Was yes, exactly.
Had dialogue, discourse, etc.
In this all was the reason for it.
Yeah.
Where it turns out it's two messed up kids, you know.
And does that not often seem to be the way? There's so much, as we saw recently with the suicide on the barge, you know, it's always immediately people know exactly what has caused this and what has led to it, and it is the thing that they've been campaigning and complaining about.
Well, quite happily, many people will take it and use it for their narrative.
Yeah.
But it's convenience, and that's exactly what Josh was pointing out. You know, it's not... It's now not part of this, and neither should it be, because at the end of the day, an innocent life's been taken.
Yeah.
A young girl, 15-year-old. I mean, I do worry about the people that killed her, because much like the Bulger killers, if you look at John Venables now, whilst he was a child when he killed, he's quite clearly a disturbed human being and continues to be.
Yeah.
So I don't know quite what happens to them. They talked about it was just a fantasy, but the way they talked about it was the way they carried it out. That's slightly more than a fantasy, particularly when it's killing another human being. But going back to what you were saying, I think you're right. I think people will... We've seen it across all the spectrum, even maybe on our side of the argument sometimes. We've taken situations and thought, this is very convenient. Let's say it's a Muslim guy that's committed a terrible atrocity.
Yeah.
There are definitely people on our side of the argument that will be happy to see that because they can use that for their narrative, and that's where it gets a little bit sticky.
Remember when it was a Muslim guy who killed David Amos, and of course the Parliament then saw that as a reason to push through their bill against online radicalisation, social media, hate speech and so on, which had nothing to do with it whatsoever, you know. But
sometimes it's just too convenient.
It's very sad.
Guardian now, Paul.
Yeah, outrage over police access to 50 million driving licence to run face checks. So, of course, we've all been arguing over the last few years about whether we should have sort of this face recognition technology to catch shoplifters or whatever. There was always going to be a back door, and driving licences, which I've just renewed mine the last couple of months, actually, is now that back door. And whilst I believe this is very likely to help the police, it's still going to be a huge infringement on personal liberty, which for me is a big deal.
Yeah.
I struggle with that. I'm very uncomfortable with it. However, I think we're on a path now which is irreversible, and that's the way we're going to go. And we're going to go that way until we realise quite how dangerous that is.
Well, and even once we have realised that, it will turn back. I mean, I've always thought it was quite interesting that we lived as a civilization for hundreds, arguably thousands of years, under the impression that we were being watched in a supernatural sense, that people had a sort of religious conscience which would have some effect on their behaviour. And I remember even being quite young, I know this sounds kind of crazy, but thinking that my ancestors, my grandfather when he died, would be watching me. I'd have a sort of sense of that.
Yeah.
Even now, they say if you put up these large-scale sort of cardboard cutouts of police officers in windows, it actually has an effect on people's behaviour, even though they can see that it is obviously a cardboard cutout.
Even actually a pair of eyes is enough to have that impact.
Yeah,
it stops crimes being committed, stops shoplifting and whatnot.
And so all this, the degree of surveillance we're coming under now, and I mean, if you ever drive through London now, you sense that your car is being watched all times. There is never a moment.
I am hardly urinating at all. Anyway, I used to just go wherever I wanted.
You're in that stage of a relationship when you can't fart.
yeah. It's like that's what I'm like now in central London. But what's crazy is how it's actually already law. It got put through. It was like a little line as part of legislation that's already gone through. So they're already have that right to do it. They could just sort of press button. They can go to if you want to be at a protest, you want to protest against vaccines or whatever it is that our wonderful viewers, not judging, wanted.
but just slightly.
But the vaccine thing, of course, I mean, that is very relevant because a lot of people felt that was moving towards a sort of bioidentity markers and so on.
Yeah, well, that's it. Well, if you had protested, they could have gone there. You wouldn't have worn a mask, I assume, if you were protesting against the vaccine. That would be sort of somewhat hypocritical.
Yeah, that would have been weird.
And then they would have got your face.
With the eyes,
they would have seen who was interested, and then they could have checked you up and see whether you've had it or whatever it is. I don't know. Point is, this extra level is not good, and it's become automatic.
It's coming up. Let's nip through these last two quickly. The tax cuts in the eye, Josh.
Yes. So tax cuts in 2024 after surprise fall in inflation. The reality is, of course, there were going to be tax cuts in 2024 because there's an election.
Yeah.
But the big news is that, yes, the inflation has fallen greater or lower, I don't know whichever you want to look at it. It's 3.4%, which is considerably better than they thought it was going to be. That, of course, beats Sunak's, one of his targets was to get it below 5%. So this is good news. It's good news for people who are going to be renewing their mortgage in the next...
Good news for people who use money to buy objects.
Yes, good news. Good news for pretty much everyone. Look, it's still far away from the 2%. Economists are kind of saying, well, this is good, but we've done the easy stuff now. It's going to be much harder for the rest of the decline to happen.
Yes.
But
the low-hanging fruit has been
is what they've exactly.
Go on, Paul.
Generally, I'd be inclined to agree with that. However, this is the biggest downside in the economy, in interest rates, since early 2021, since just after the pandemic. And just as economists underestimated the inflation on the way up, they appear to have underestimated it on the way down again, which, for me, adds an element of doubt of whether they know exactly what's going on.
I'm absolutely sure that they don't.
And this has caught them by surprise.
Yeah.
And I think this is one way of hiding that surprise by talking about tax cuts.
I mean, also, I understand why they do it, but this kind of inflation, the inflation that we've had over the last 2 or 3 years, has by no means just been caused by people having too much ready cash in their pockets, you know. So using interest rates to try and limit people, you know, maybe buying a TV on credit card or something, that isn't the problem at all. It's a multivariate cause.
Absolutely. And look, prices, they're saying, they're 20% higher than they were in 2020.
And they're not going to come down again.
No, they're
some
not.
of them are 30% higher. Some, not everything, but some food prices are...
Oh, yeah.
They never come down.
Food bills are absolutely still insane, and that's still very high at 9%.
I'm switching to net zero for food. Anyway, we'll finish with the Daily Star very quickly. What is this apocalypse of which they speak?
Apocalypse soon. Just 200 years before the world destroyed by global warming. And old people farting and burping are partly to blame, Simon.
Marvellous. I listened to Radio 4...
As you were farting and burping.
Like a traitor that I am. J.G. Ballard, the science fiction writer, and he wrote a book, I can't remember what it was called, about London being underwater due to flooding caused by reversal of the solar flares or something in the 1960s. It was just quite interesting hearing, you know, the various scenarios that are just always being cooked up. I'm not saying that there's nothing...
It is like, I mean, they talk about boffins and there only been 73,000 days left to live, but, you know... So what?
I think 200 years gives us enough time to create some sort of thermostat. That's the front pages. Coming up in the second section, good news for traditional central heating systems. Throw another log on the fire. We'll see you shortly. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel. Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Country Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans, still here with Josh Howie and Paul Cox. So let's continue with the stories. We have the Telegraph now, Paul.
We do.
And of all the things I ever expected to feel sentimentally protective towards, gas boilers were not top of the list. But
no,
now...
and the same with Tory backbenchers as well. I feel some sympathy with them in this story as well. Rishi Sunak faces boiler tax rebellion. So Tory backbenchers mobilise against plans to penalise boiler makers that do not meet heat pump installation targets. Manufacturers have responded to the proposals by increasing their prices and raising them by £120 to offset the cost of the heat pump rollout, which is really, it is an important side message to this, because of course every reaction has an action has a reaction, all that good stuff. So I'm quite sympathetic here with the Tory backbenchers.
Is that actually how heat pumps work?
Yeah, I think the argument is they don't work particularly well. I'll tell you what does work really well. Gas boilers.
Yeah.
So for about 100 years now, we've used gas boilers in our homes. They've become quite efficient.
And what also works is insulation. I do think that although I know insulation was one of the things that the Just Stop Oil people protest about and so on, but we are still well short of maximising that extent. Certainly in our home. I come in quite often and literally find a window open over a radiator that's on and so on. It goes absolutely spare. But I do think we could, like, that's a fairly sort of straightforward thing that isn't quite so invasive.
Yeah, but heat pumps aren't appropriate for flats.
No.
Which, I live in a flat.
Yeah.
And the fact is that, of course, the gas boiler people, they pump their money up. You know, it's crazy. They've already gone, we're going to add 120 quid, whether or not they've already got any of these additional fines, which they haven't. The government says that they're basically going to hit these targets anyway. So, of course, this is just an excuse for price gouging. And but then the Energy Secretary says, I'm going to talk to anyone who I think is passing an unfair cost. Well, you're going to talk to it. That's not going to do anything.
No.
So just even the mention of net zero, the amount of excuses has allowed companies to just put the money up and go, oh, no, it's all because of net zero. We've got to charge you more sorry. There's nothing we can do about it.
It used to be a few years ago, wasn't it? Obviously, following COVID. Remember that?
Yes.
And then you went into a pub. Obviously, following COVID, there isn't any bacon.
Well, pints are now 11 quid.
Exactly. You'll be waiting 13 hours for service. It's extraordinary. They will latch on to any excuse that becomes normalised.
Do you know what? It's how we started the programme tonight about narratives. Net zero has very little to do with this. They've not won hearts and minds with net zero. And I always feel very suspicious of anything that has to be crowbarred in. If someone says you must do this continually, and we continue to question it going, but why? But why? You're not giving us the empirical evidence why we must do this exact thing. I'm not questioning climate change, but I'm questioning why we should react the way that we are to climate change and always feel as if we're the bad human beings.
Well, I disagree with you. I think that the idea of net zero is a good idea, to not make a situation worse, which is similar to what you say, but of course it's the means by which we actually do it and the costs that now that we're actually seeing these things implemented, to try and manipulate the market like this, to force it through isn't how you necessarily get... You can get change like that, but there are going to be unintended consequences. In this case, it's going to make people who need to buy a boiler next year pay 120 quid more.
Staying with the Telegraph, Josh, Esther Rantzen continues to exercise an extraordinary control over the legislative programme of the nation.
Yeah, well, this is it's interesting. So, Esther Rantzen a few days ago said she was coming out, and she's 83, she's got cancer, it's very sad, and she's joined Dignitas, and that has kind of brought this debate up again. And this article is essentially saying that Starmer may allow a free vote on assisted dying to end injustice, but he's not said that. No, there's no indication that he will actually do that, but because of his previous position on it, where he has when he was.
So there's been no new announcement.
No, there's been no new announcement, or whatever. But they're basically saying because of the position that he took, he rarely prosecuted people when he was there. He has talked about it in the past, and he did when there was a vote in 2015, I think. He did vote for it.
So what do we think? A free vote? I mean, in a similar way to you vote with your conscience or whatever.
I mean. I think most of us here would be on the libertarian side of this argument, and therefore free will is the essential backbone of libertarianism, and therefore we would probably decide, unless for religious reasons, and that's the only argument I can find, really, that you wouldn't do.
The other argument, I would still broadly support it myself, but the experience in Canada has been quite
that's the problem,
hasn't it? Seeing how it can escalate, because I'd always thought that was a bogeyman, that kind of, before you know it, there'll be euthanizing tramps and so on, and then you kind of go, they're euthanizing tramps.
And it's not just Canada, it is also, I think, Belgium. Holland, I remember on Free Speech Nation, they covered the story of a mother who was, it seems like she was essentially put down and against her, and wasn't fully there, and her son was going, wait a minute, this was all gone through, and she couldn't really have made that decision by herself. So, as Keir Starmer repeatedly has talked about in the past, it's about safeguarding. But, of course, when you bring these rules in, they're always going to be open to manipulation.
And as Rantzen has, I think, reasonably said, she can afford to go to Dignitas, but it's not cheap. She's
That's 20 grand, I think.
She's not going to be able to take all her family there. It would be quite nice for her to sort of...
You're not allowed to, Simon, I don't think, because you can't see... They can't be seen to be encouraging her to take her own life.
Even if it was in Switzerland.
So she kind of have to go on her own, which is sad. I support her choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think is where I stand on it.
American news now in The Guardian, and a state once famous for its potato-eating beetles is now trying to eradicate another threat to human civilization.
Trump lashes out at Colorado ruling. This is in The Guardian. We need to state right at the top. Trump lashes out at Colorado ruling, removing him.
This has happened.
This is not untrue. But some of the way but I mean, when I say things like lashing out,
slightly emotive term.
Yeah, I would say so. Ruling removing him from the ballot. Predictably, he says, the ex-president took to his social media site to condemn the decision and raise funds. Now, that's why I say this is in The Guardian, because I don't think this quite happened. And they're citing Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which is not something I'm familiar with, but I do know, having scanned it on Google today, it mentions nothing about presidents.
The Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, according to somebody I saw talking about it earlier who knew what they were talking about, was created in the specific context of the Confederacy, trying to secede from the Union.
Yeah. So basically, if you had fought against the Union, then you wouldn't be able to hold political office.
Exactly.
That's the idea.
Yeah. My thoughts on this are, however, that this is taking place in Colorado, largely Democratic, Democratic judges there. Democrats, sorry, they're all Democratic. Largely Democrat judges there, and they're ultimately they'll be superseded by the US Supreme Court. I think this will be overturned.
It's largely red.
Yeah, I think so, and because I just don't think it's right, even if it is Trump, I just don't think it's right that you should be able to say this in a state.
Certainly
People can be out of
at this point in the election cycle, where you can see he's got a significant lead over Biden.
Seems interesting.
I mean, they are absolutely dancing on a volcano, I think, at the moment.
I agree with you. I think they are as well. But I want to point out that this suit was actually brought forward by Republicans.
Right.
That's number one.
OK.
So this wasn't a Democratic
pesky
move. Those horrible little things called fact. The legalities of it seem to be more about not fighting this particular law that we were talking about in the section, but about whether it was a riot or whether it was an insurgency. And this is what... So Trump himself used this person who to sort of back him up, but it turns out, actually, if they'd shown the full clip, this legal expert actually goes in to lay into Trump and sort of say... Now, Trump doesn't help himself by calling the people who are arrested and have gone to jail political prisoners, because that doesn't suggest to me a riot, that suggests to me an insurgency. So there's a contradiction there, even coming from him.
Well, it's tricky, that, isn't it? It could suggest... I take your point, but it could suggest that they are criminals, or you might even just say over-enthusiastic protesters,
vandals,
who have been martyred in the pursuit of elevating this to an insurgency. So, in that respect, would they then be political prisoners because they've been turned into political pawns? Essentially, they're being used to create a sense of
No, it's true. But
well, we're not seeing anything from even the Democratic side of the argument that suggests that they're going to fight this in any meaningful way, though.
No.
It feels to me like Trump is actually on path to become the US president again, and if he is, it's largely because of the way the Democrats have led in the last 3 years.
I totally agree with you. And the remarkable thing is, they've actually had a pretty good few years as well. The economy is doing very well in America.
Well, Ron DeSantis is saying that this is a conspiracy. He's sort of suggesting that actually this is the Democrats. They're not fighting it very specifically because they want Trump to be the main opposition, because that would then bring out their voters, whereas someone else a bit more, less marginal would
there's a lot of sense to that as well. Very interesting. Telegraph now, Josh. We've heard of nose-to-tail eating, but this is a new idea.
Oh, man, come on. Did you ever watch that film?
Human Centipede.
I thought it felt weird even.
I never watched it.
I never watched it, no. California approves toilet-to-tap scheme to recycle the drinking water. This is because, of course, there's some real issues with water. This is actually the second state to do it, I think, Colorado, which maybe that's what happened with Trump. So, they've recycled water for a long time, but this is the first time it's going to have stricter legislation than normal recycled water in terms of they have to treat it for stuff that it doesn't even have. Essentially, like for everything, and then they add the minerals back to it.
But I mean, most of our drinking water in London has been recycled. I think they say 6 times in London on average. There's nothing new to that, is there? It's not all going into the ocean and being rained down.
Well, this is it. When they say when it goes in, anyone who lives downstream of a recycling plant or whatever, water plant is going to be drinking recycled water anyway. But they, like I say, they have a big water problem. If it is healthy and the science is strident,
the one thing they seem unable to filter out of water, of course, is hormones, isn't it? This is the concern.
Turns the frogs gay, Simon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the estrogens or xenestrogens. But that maybe is another issue. I don't know. I think
maybe this
past the point of.
You think that's
of course, as we've already covered, nearly all water is recycled in one shape or form.
All water is recycled.
But by its very nature, you know, it doesn't just come from the tap.
No.
As, like my dad would have told me, you know, when I was 5 years old and just left the tap running. But it's the way this story frames it. It makes it sound like it's just a pipe straight from someone's toilet into the next-door neighbour's house. There you go.
Little,
it's been through a brick.
Cafetiere sort of...
It's been through a little filter. Now get on and drink it. They do manage to cram a lot of climate change into this story as well.
Well, water, I mean, but it's not even about climate change, because there are real water shortages.
There are.
So this is something that...
In the desert.
Partly because California should never have been occupied anyway. I mean, Chinatown, that great movie.
All about
that, isn't it?
70 years ago, 60 years ago.
Well done for making it halfway. In the third section, we've got Addict Salmon fighting his way upstream to his ancestral spawning grounds. Don't miss that. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
And welcome back to Headliners. We're into the second half. Telegraph now, Paul, and the UK government is having a bit of a post-Troubles trouble with Ireland.
They are, yeah, this has reared its head again. Sunak to fight Irish attempt to strike down Troubles law in ECHR. So this is Minister attacks Dublin's misguided, in inverted commas, challenge to British Act giving immunity to hundreds of soldiers. So this is Chris Heaton-Harris, the Northern Ireland Secretary. He said that the UK government profoundly regrets the decision taken by the Irish government to bring this unnecessary case against the UK. And this is talking about immunity against, obviously, people that fought in the Troubles in Northern Ireland. And
but if they're soldiers, they were only following orders anyway.
Well, it's exactly, and these particular Troubles are something we were discussing in the break that doesn't get discussed a lot anymore. But of course, this has been the bane of these Troubles. You know, who should not be prosecuted, who should go to jail, who should be released. Now, ultimately, the only way to move forward, much like the Good Friday Agreement, is a level of forgiveness. And I'm on the UK side of this, not unsurprisingly, I guess, but I don't see the point now in dragging this on. It just seems vengeance otherwise.
I'm astonished that it can be. It's 25 years since the initial agreement was made.
I think it's emblematic of what we're seeing in Ireland right now with their particular flavour of politics and leadership.
Right.
You saw that with the riots after the riots. That's the problem. They've got it into my head. They weren't really riots. They were just people very upset saying, please don't stab our women and children.
There was definitely some riots.
There was some largely peaceful rioting going on. But you know what I mean? The way it was framed, yeah, exactly. The way it was framed was as a far right. Far right. That's all we were told. These are far right.
It was just a crack.
Yeah.
Just a crack.
So are you saying that you think this is like whipping up a certain amount of electoral...
Well, I think they're on the back foot. I mean, this is me being cynical, but I think the Irish government, even amongst their own people, are on the back foot slightly here.
I think...
To the point that you actually see a lot of Irish people agreeing with English people on subjects now, which is unheard of.
So they're drawing attention
So this feels to me like they're trying to change
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the whole point of the UK government bringing forward this legislation was to give people closure. The idea being that if we just do a general amnesty, then people can come forward, reveal what happened to security officers, to army officers, and then families will know the fate of their loved ones. That makes sense to me.
Absolutely.
It's unlikely that one's going to be sent to jail after 25 years that any other cases are going through.
Yeah. Just allows for a history to be understood at a personal and national level.
Yeah, but the Irish government obviously feels differently.
Well, I think Paul's onto something there, but Scotland now, Josh, in the Times. Alex Salmond has got the gender reform bit between his teeth.
He sure has. He's sticking it to his former comrades. Alex Salmond, gender reforms were the worst legislation in the history of devolution. 100% agree with him. It was a massive mistake, a massive own goal. And then Shona Robinson, who's the Deputy First Minister, has sort of admitted so, but she won't apologise for it. But she's saying, yes, but we need lessons about Hollywood needs to up its game on the bill scrutiny. Now, she was in charge of all of that, and I remember as it was going through, women's rights activists were providing evidence. It was just being ignored or not called up, and it was just like they were seeing what they wanted to see and ignoring the rest of it.
They were so extraordinarily
dogmatic,
passionate
and biased
I guess
about
they might
it.
say, but it was just ridiculous.
It was crazy and evidence-based policy making. So this is coming out of her mouth after that. What feminists were, the way they were treated during the creation of this bill, and the idea that she's not going to apologise for it is.
And Hamza Yusuf is not mentioned in this particular article, I don't think, but he was certainly very keen on it as well. Right? It's not like they've got a clean
Not at all. The reason he's not mentioned largely, not because it's the Times, but in general, is because they're trying to separate him now from Sturgeon, which of course they can't. He's a prodigy of Sturgeon in the same way that Sturgeon is a prodigy of Salmond, and Salmond is going to wield the last blow, I think, at some point in time. When this went on, the debates went on, the galleries were full to the brim of trans activists. They weren't. Josh said feminists, and I tend to agree with Josh on that, but a lot of them were just women that said, please, can we protect our spaces?
That would not be whooshed or wished.
Yeah, wished. And rightly, women won't be wished, and rightly so. You know, this was suicide, political suicide from Sturgeon and the SNP.
And it was so arrogant as well, wasn't it? Because they were convinced that they had tied up Rishi Sunak in knots.
Yeah, and the right side of history as well. They have the morality on their side and whatnot.
Daily Mail now, Paul. There seems to be some controversy in Parliament over the exact meaning of the North. Does it or does it not include Islington?
It definitely doesn't. Ministers mocked after boasting of using £235 million taken from cancelling HS2 train line to fix roads in London and branding it part of a scheme to improve connectivity to the North, which of course is absolutely ridiculous. The Department of Transport sparked uproar this morning when it hailed the new spending in the capital as being made. Oh my goodness!
They sparked up.
Yes, as being made possible for using rerouted H2 funding. So of course, I mean, what makes Northerners happier than seeing London's roads in peak condition?
You're not going to get a new railway because we need to fill in. But I mean, it is. I don't know. The state of the roads is
terrible.
I mean, technically, it is connecting to the north.
Yeah,
it's just connecting
Stamford and the north.
Just a little bit So it's there's a part of the connection is definitely to the north.
I always enjoyed, I'm not sure it's entirely relevant, but coming out of King's Cross, I lived about a mile north of King's Cross, Holloway
towards
sort of
Angel.
area, Caledonian Road, and there are two roads that go up there, York Way and Caledonian Road. Now, Caledonia, I think, it was like an old word for Scotland, basically, isn't it?
Feels like it.
So you had one road leaving London that was for Scotland, and then about 500 yards to the left, you had another one going to York. I always felt you could probably have used the same.
Yeah, at least until you got to York.
Yeah,
it's kind of on the way, isn't it?
And then you kind of branch off. Anyway, I don't know if that would save him some money. What have we got now? The Telegraph, dietary advice, Josh. An occasional faster yourself. Maybe this sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, look, go Demetarian to tackle climate change, UN report urges. So they need to cut the amount of nitrogen going into the environment. A lot of that comes through the treatment of foodstuffs and growing of foodstuffs, which then to feed animals. They're saying part of it can be done with science and better or more efficient farming techniques. But they are saying that a part of the cutting down this waste or surplus of nitrogen into the environment is going to be by people cutting down on their meat.
So it's about growing animal feed rather than animal
Yes, that uses up a lot more.
Okay,
exactly. And they're saying, cutting people down to around 500 grams of meat. Of course, someone like, obviously, our own Lewis Schaefer would argue that meat eating is what keeps you slim and is the healthiest way to eat. But as someone who is entering into a Christmas period where I have gone a little bit bonkers on the foodstuffs, I maybe think that cutting down could be a good thing.
Yeah, what you've eaten too much, you mean?
You've gone crazy.
Have you?
I've gone Uber 2 in the morning every morning. Burgers coming to the house and stuff.
Well, that's incredible. I mean, I went to a dinner party last night, which doesn't sound like the sort of thing I would go to, does it? But I did go to a dinner party, and it was full to the brim of lots of cheese and meats, a sort of pre-Christmas thing. And I'm all for it. I mean, I'm not convinced. I'm still not convinced. And I've actually had this conversation in private with Josh around the impact of methane and climate change. And I just think they could leave us alone a little bit. You know, we haven't got a lot to enjoy. And I think it's negligible. I know I can't back that up with...
Also, I don't think people do eat that much red meat, do they? I mean, I like red meat.
Lewis does it all for us all.
That much. I think what people eat a lot of is, like, crap, you know? I think it would be good if we all just improved our diet, ate a bit less and good stuff. That would probably make some sort of sense. And I suspect, I don't know, it might just be prejudice, but I suspect if you thought to yourself, I'm going to eat less meat but better meat, that might be, like, healthier for the environment too. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Like, I'm sure it would be.
I worry that a lot of the stuff I eat that's like in sandwiches, you know, in chicken sandwiches, that's probably not had a very healthy life cycle before it ends up in there. I don't know. This is just prejudice, as I say. But I think that's usually the best approach.
Maybe it's a bit selfish of me, and it is enjoyable. I just think that if we were to go full Greta. We'd all end up just eating sort of widgety grubs and living in tents or whatever. And it just doesn't feel like... It just feels like an overreaction to me.
Well, this isn't going full Greta. They're saying...
But I just want to have a go at Greta, Josh.
A little
Half
bit.
Greta.
Half Greta.
Demi-Greta. Another good reason to cut back on the calories, Paul, as girth is inversely related to fertility, if not to pleasure.
Yeah, I'm starting to feel a little bit sorry for women. An extra 1 centimetre around the waist raises risk of infertility by 3%.
Around this...
I mean, don't use me as an example. Basically, if you have got a 43-inch waist or greater, which even I don't have a 43-inch waist, then you are twice as likely to struggle to get pregnant as those with a waist on...
Get pregnant or get someone pregnant.
So this is... You should say it's all about women, basically.
Yeah, this is about women.
Josh, are you saying that only women can get pregnant?
Are you saying that you're really not over 43 inches?
This is the big debate. I'm not over 43 inches. I'm a 38-inch waist, I believe it or not.
What?
Yeah.
I'm 44 or something.
No, you're not. Well, actually, you're probably wearing trousers where you're supposed to. So I'm wearing mine under the gut, maybe.
Are you wearing them at your ankles?
No.
That's a noble tradition of the British club comedians.
Yeah, absolutely.
Folded over their belt. There's no problem with
this. Yeah, we should say, all joking aside, that this is completely and utterly related to 100% real women who want to get pregnant.
Right.
And they're saying that for every centimetre over what is a 30-inch waist is really creating a 3%
knocking off your probability
you will not
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I
Get
found that
pregnant.
every inch extra of fat I have around my testicles also, that makes a difference. To
Wow.
Me. Yeah.
You've got 5 kids.
In the measurements of it.
You've got some athlete testicles.
This is actually, this is an interesting bringing together of two subjects that we commonly deal with, which is the replacement theory in terms of the need to up our population growth and obesity.
Yeah.
So this is the bringing together of the both. If we don't deal with obesity with women, we're not going to deal with the other one.
They're just going to die out, and they've already got you.
Yeah.
One more section to go with Switzerland going snowblind, South Korea going bananas. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners for our final section. The Mail now. Josh, Switzerland are taking an interesting approach to the war on drugs. Total capitulation.
Indeed. Switzerland considers legalising cocaine. Politicians declare the war on drugs has failed. We have someone here who says we have a lot of cocaine in Switzerland right now. The cheapest prices and the highest quality we have ever seen. That's the Deputy Director of Addiction Switzerland. He's also the chair of the tourist board. Everybody booking flights there.
Everything must go.
You gotta know it. I mean, it's like you can get a bump for like 10 francs, the price of beer. Come on over. But it's also got the highest cocaine use of 3 of the cities. I think are on the top 10.
Has it really?
Cities around the world.
And despite that very strong economy.
Yes, right. So. It's
safe.
Not surprised, everyone's been working very hard.
Yeah.
All this good quality cocaine.
The reality is it's coming from a place where so many there seem to have done it, but it also seems to... I've joked about it in the past. I've never actually done it. I've never even tried a cigarette. But because my family did it. But there is an argument that when you legalise something and make it less cool as such, that it might, you know, we see that with alcohol and even, I think, weed use stuff, like teenagers, you know, they see the adults doing it legally and they decide to sort of push back against it.
Well, prohibition certainly proved that banning alcohol was a disaster and created organised crime in America, you know. So I think that is, I mean, I absolutely agree with it from that point of view. It's tricky to know with cocaine, isn't it? Because I don't think any country has ever really, you know,
done
tried
this.
It, you know? But maybe it will work. If it were to make it safer for people, I suppose the fear is that it might simply just elevate use, and that might not turn out to be a terrible thing.
Well, it's more
you know?
addictive. People will talk more rubbish, which is bad.
And people do die in their 50s or 60s usually. This is the thing. Young people seem to be able to take it with a degree of impunity as long as it's reasonably pure. But there comes a point when your heart gives out. I don't know. Maybe that would be it.
But then, of course, I always feel like there's an hypocrisy with alcohol. Alcohol is a bad drug. That's the reality of it.
Absolutely.
But it's legalised. We make a lot of money from it with taxes and whatnot.
It's deep in our culture as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and I love a beer. I'm not whining about it. I'm just saying there is hypocrisy there.
Absolutely.
Where another drug with arguably also negative aspects to it is suddenly the most evil thing in the world.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What do you think, Paul?
Well, there was no war on drugs pre-Nixon, was there? That was a phrase that he coined, and ever since then, the establishment have continued to lose that war.
Yeah.
And if you speak to any policeman that's been part of that for a long time, they'll tell you that they've got no grip on it whatsoever, and the criminals are winning. So ultimately, I think delegalising drugs is probably a good thing to try now.
Yeah.
Because taking back control of the drug supply is going in some way towards helping the user make sure they get the right quality whenever they do, and you're able to then manage the flow and flux. And what are the criminals going to do?
Yeah.
If you can just buy it in a vending machine anyway.
Absolutely. Tragic
Vending
comic...
machine. This is my new idea.
Okay.
Tragic-comic tales of insane exam pressure from South Korea now in the Telegraph.
It's terrifying, this stuff, actually. But let me read the story so you know what I'm talking about. So South Korean students sue government after teacher ends 9-hour exam 90 seconds early. And on the face of it, you'd think that wouldn't bother any of us. You'd be thinking that's a great relief. But of course, there's this huge culture in South Korea. This is a reflection of intense pressure placed on South Korean teenagers who take the notoriously difficult Soonyoung, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, apologies, Soonyoung, exam each year after revising for hours in so-called cram schools. So they're actually taking the government to court here because the results of these exams mean so much to these people that they're afraid that 90 seconds is going to be detrimental to them. Of course, in anywhere else in the world, this wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, we're stupid everywhere else.
Get on to the one last story that we have time for this evening because it's so appealing. The charming story of late-stage eccentric wealthy benefactor behaviour.
Yeah.
It feels like a movie.
Hermes Hare's... Golly gosh. Hermes Hare's legal fight to leave his fortune to his gardener. This is Nicholas Puich, or whatever. Now, this is the third richest family in the world.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Hermes...
Well, still a privately owned brand.
Yeah, well, I thought they were the parcel delivery service, but turns out they also do scarves and bags and whatnot. And, he doesn't have any kids, and he's bonded with his Moroccan gardener and his wife, and they took care of him during COVID, and he wants to basically adopt them and give him
half the
dosh.
fortune. I mean, it feels like it might be cruel to give a gardener literally, like, billions. I don't know. It might destabilise him. He's probably
I think he'll do all right.
Yeah.
If it will.
It might destabilise him.
It might, He might then hire a gardener.
I mean, he might do.
Put his feet
Don't do it like that!
Start eating all kinds of unhealthy food.
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating, though, just how huge these luxury brands are, because it's not part of my world, but LVMH, Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, that is the first European brand to go over $500 billion in capitalisation. They own almost all the other brands except for Hermes.
Oh, really? Well, they want it.
And it never touches my world at all. Anyway,
me either. Go into gardening.
The show is nearly over. Let's take another quick look at Thursday's front pages. The Daily Mail, what they did to our beautiful Brianna will haunt us forever. Guardian, outrage over police access to 50 million driving licence to run face checks. The Eye, tax cuts in 2024 after surprise fall in inflation. The Times, cheaper mortgages set to ease living costs. Financial Times, Modi ready to look into any evidence of an assassination plot on American soil. The Daily Star, apocalypse soon. That's 200 years. Well, that's all we have time for. Thank you to my guests, Josh Howie and Paul Cox. We're back tomorrow when Josh and Paul will be back with Lewis Schaefer. I will see you after Christmas. If you're watching at 5 a.m, stay tuned for breakfast. Otherwise, thank you. Good night. May your God go with you.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Thursday is going to be a very blustery day for the UK with a wind warning in force for a large swathe of the UK. That's as Storm Pia, named by the Danish Met Service, will sweep this frontal system across the UK. The strongest winds are expected to be into the North Sea, but we will see some very gusty winds across the bulk of northern areas of the UK. Before then, though, we'll see a lot of cloud around through the rest of the night. Persistent drizzly rain across northern and western areas. That rain will give way to blustery showers across the north of Scotland by tomorrow morning, and at this point the winds really strengthen. We could see storm force winds across the Northern Isles, but gales quite widely where we do have that warning in force. That rain band sweeps southward through the day, so the skies will become clearer. There will be some sunny spells by the afternoon, but as I said, it is going to be a very blustery afternoon, and there will be some quite intense showers moving in from the north and west. The southwest will hold on to the slightly milder air, but a lot more of that cloud and rain through much of the day, and we're likely to see some travel delays due to that wind warning as well. Friday will likely be a calmer but still quite a windy day, and we'll see a stream of showers still moving in from the north and west. In the southwest, though, a drier and brighter day. However, in the far north, with the strong winds and a risk of snow showers, there is a risk of blizzards. Into the weekend, though, it does stay mild and windy in the run up to Christmas. That's all for now. See you later.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Carson, this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news